Karl is the principal investigator and manager of the Dairy, Soil, and Water Region Project, affectionately called DSWR, at Dairy Management, Inc. Karl's work focuses on the feed component of their net zero initiative and 2050 stewardship goals. Karl, we can see that you have shared your screen and it's all in good working condition. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks so much to Soil Health Institute for the invitation. I'm grateful and pleased and very excited to be here. And as many people have noted before me, Soil Health Institute has been a wonderful partner in many projects that we've heard about, and you will hear again. This is another one where they've been provided critical assistance and input for us. So much here. It's been very exciting to listen this morning and then this afternoon about all the things that are going on in terms of sustainability in the food and fiber value chain. Really, really incredible to me. One of the best things that I heard this morning among many was something from Jesse Daystar, and I'm going to paraphrase him, where he said, at Cotton, we've been thinking about sustainability and talking about it for decades. We just called it something different. It was efficiency. And I would say very much the same thing for dairy, that much of what we've been doing has been focusing on efficiency, and there have been incredible sustainability improvements associated with that focus. So I'm Vice President for Agronomy at Dairy Management, Inc., which is the dairy checkoff organization, and the principal investigator for this Dairy, Soil, and Water Regeneration Project, as Christine noted, also called DSWR. We couple of opening slides here. So in the dairy industry, we have a vision that U.S. dairy will be is viewed as an environmental solution, and in support of that vision, we've made commitments to some environmental aspects through 2050. One of those is to be greenhouse gas neutral. We're going to intend to optimize water use and improve water quality through our actions going forward. If we start to think about let me just get rid of my toolbar. All right, thanks for that. Thanks for your patience. If we talk about mitigating dairy's environmental footprint, we can think about this in terms of greenhouse gas emissions or other environmental elements like water quality, et cetera. We've got 4 main areas. We've got the manure component, we've got a feed component, we've got the cow herself is making greenhouse gases, is generating nutrients, and then we've got an energy footprint as well. And so in terms of greenhouse gases, the enteric methane production from the cow is about 1/3 of the dairy farm environmental footprint in terms of greenhouse gases. Manure is about another 1/3. And in fact, the feed production is about 1/4 of our footprint. And so that's where a lot of our effort here in the Dairy, Soil, and Water Regeneration Project focuses on. So the Soil and Water Regen Project was a project that was conceived at DMI, and pretty quickly we pulled in the Soil Health Institute, and they've been, as I noted, critical partners in developing the project and now in implementation. But we received a grant from the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research of $10 million. And then the industry through checkoff funds, as well as from corporate philanthropic funds, are kicking in another $13 million plus. So we've got more than a $23 million project. We've got 8 research institutions involved, 7 in addition to the Soil Health Institute. There will be 5 years of research followed by 1 year of data analysis and publication time. And why are we engaging in this project, in the Dairy, Soil, and Water Regeneration Project? Because there's a huge lack of data for carbon sequestration opportunities in dairy farm systems, and in what greenhouse gas emissions are a result from these dairy farm systems. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more deeply here. Again, in addition to the Soil Health Institute, providing broad assistance and overview across these projects. We're also partnering with major research institutions from the Vermont in the east all the way to California in the west and many places in between. We have selected our sites on the basis of the approximate number of cows in similar production regions. So we've got 4 regions that represent about 80% of the dairy herd across the United States. The project consists of 3 main areas of focus. We're looking at soil carbon sequestration at each of these sites. We're looking at environmental outcomes from these sites, including nitrous oxide emissions. And then we're looking at soil health and water, both water use and water quality related benefits. And let me dig into that a little bit more deeply. We've broken the project out into 3 different tasks. The third task, I'll go start with 3 and then go to 1 and then 2. 3 will be communication. So it's really important that once we get our information aggregated and published, it'll be really critical that we spread that word and get that information out to farmers so that we can get the best and optimum use out of all of that information. The task 1 involves, task 1 and 2 are both scientific efforts. Task 1 is actually being implemented by Soil Health Institute team members, and that's essentially a general dairy farm soil health assessment. So they're going to be going around to the same regions that are represented by our research projects in the previous map. They have been soliciting dairy farm volunteers who are implementing different practices on those farms and then collecting soil samples, and they'll be running soil health analytics on those samples. Task 2, I'll go into in more detail in just a moment, but again, this involves plot research for both nitrous oxide emissions as well as soil carbon responses to different tillage and cover crop and manure products. The thing I really want to emphasize, and if you take nothing else away from my slides here this afternoon, I want to emphasize this project has brought and involved extensive coordination across our research locations. I would almost say unprecedented coordination. Our experiments, from Vermont to California to Texas and all places in between, are designed as consistently as possible, given some of the obvious differences across those locations, but we've tried to design them as closely and consistently as possible. Our soil, our manure, our crop samples are all collected using the same protocols by those research teams, and they're all analyzed, at the same laboratory. Our gas samples, our CO2, our CH4, and our N2O samples are being collected, and there's other field measurements that we're conducting. We're all using the exact same instruments at each location, and all of that data is uploaded into the cloud. And another great task and contribution that Soil Health Institute is making here is they are providing a centralized quality assurance, quality control, and data curation service for us as well. So just a unprecedented level of coordination across sites so that we can compare the results across sites at a much higher level than we might normally be able to if 7 different institutions ran projects the way each individual person would want to, without input or thought across the other states. So I already mentioned task 1. There are a number of soil sample analytics that we're being conducted on those soils being collected, and they too are informed by SHI's North American Assessment of Soil Health Indicators project. So we're going to be running POC. There is a soil carbon stock and bulk density measurement, and ACE protein, aggregate stability, plant available water are the main types of analytics that are being conducted on those dairy farm soil samples. And again, I want to emphasize some of the sample soils are being collected from farms that are conducting what we would call more business as usual practices. So for example, tillage, and you can see in the picture on the right of the screen, versus advanced soil health type practices represented by that middle photo on the screen there. In terms of task 2, we've got several different angles that we're taking on this one. All of our sites were collecting agronomic performance data. Of course, farmers are very interested in that. What soil carbon sequestration, how much carbon is accumulating over the 5-year life of the project and different treatments. Again, the soil health impacts and other environmental outcomes. We're deploying a systems-based approach, and we have both a field scale study, and the picture here represents some of the plots at our Texas research plot in the Panhandle. And we also have a large plot study where we're splitting a field and looking at in depth at a number of parameters as we implement a business as usual, again, versus an advanced soil health system type of comparison. That field scale component is a soil health by hydrology focus, and we have that at 3 sites in Wisconsin, Texas, California, Vermont, and New York. So you can see again in the picture, this is an example of the advanced soil health system on the left of the PowerPoint slide versus the conventional business as usual on the right. We're also looking at both water quality and water quantity at different stations. So in the Panhandle and in California and Idaho, we're looking at water use, so water quantity. And then at Wisconsin and Vermont, we have locations that are set up where we can monitor water quality results. Wisconsin will be a surface runoff collection and measurements, and in Vermont, we'll have both surface and subsurface collection and water impacts. Again, I mentioned the socialization and learning piece, where once we've gained the insights from this project, we're going to work very hard and have significant, effort and plans for getting that information spread out to the dairy community and others, so that it can be made use of. And with that, that's a quick run through the Dairy Soil and Water Regen project. And if there's time for questions, I'd be delighted to take them.
All right, Karl. How about this first question here from Sam Wellman? What are you hoping to learn about water use through this project?
So when you think about especially in our field scale study, where we're deploying quite large acreages of business as usual compared to soil health practices, want to start to measure, are we able to irrigate less, for example, in those soil health areas, like we would expect if the soil is functioning as we hope it would, from increasing carbon and improving the soil health. So that's the type of thing, but mostly it's monitoring water quantity used to support the crops that we're harvesting in these conditions.
Okay. So I'll ask a real hard question. You said that one of the reasons why we're engaged in this project is because there's not enough data. So at the end of the project, is there going to be enough data to answer some of these key questions?
So how I was talking about how excited I was to be here and everything. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still very excited. No, that's a great question, Christine, and that's a really important one for folks to understand. So I appreciate you asking that. So the short answer is we are going to continue to need more data. That 7 sites across the country, is not going to be enough, but we will have a outstanding foundation, in terms of protocols and methodology for continuing to build and add on to, the more information that we need to be garnering from these dairy farm systems.
Okay. So when do you anticipate having published results for this project?
So one of the reasons for this being a 5-year project is that it takes, as many of you know who are involved in soil health in the field, it takes several years to start to see measurable changes, right? I mean, the farmers were talking about, yeah, I was seeing changes pretty quickly, but we have to also be able to measure them, right, for publication. And so it's a 5-year research project, and we're going to be pretty much sticking to that calendar and rely on the journal publications as the way to kick off the communications and learnings that will follow.
All right. We still have some time. There's a common theme in some of these questions about how the research takes into account the wide variation amongst herd sizes, grazing, and manure types. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, you know, we've heard a lot about variability, right? And I think if we think about all through this morning, there are many variables when you get out into the field. And so, you know, basically it sounds to me like people are asking about variables associated with dairy farms. And again, that's just, there's a level of variability that we're not going to be able to take into consideration here. So having said that, we do have new manure products involved in this. So we are using some large scale manure treatment systems and using products in some of these plots to measure the outcomes there. And frankly, we have some maybe some older manure products that you know, compost or dried dairy solids that we're also using as a way to, you know, to figure out how they're actually working in the field and what the carbon outcomes and greenhouse gas outcomes are of these. So even though we didn't go out intentionally trying to find a small farm or a large farm to be host, I would argue we represent, you know, liquid dairy manure and other types of manures just by virtue of the farms that ended up being partners here in this project.
Okay, and then we're out of time, but I'm going to throw one more question in here because I like it. Are you going to integrate the data on agronomy, greenhouse gases, and water quality and soil health to make any recommendations on optimized practices?
So I think my response to that is there may be an opportunity for doing that, but what I think Christine might agree, what we've found as we've dived into each of these sites, every site, every dairy is a little bit different, and we're going to have to figure out, we're going to have people who are systems thinkers on the ground, taking the information that is derived from this and many other projects that are ongoing in order to help each individual farmer put together a set of practices that are going to work for their operation. So we'll get some indications about directionality. And again, I think it's going to be up to the individuals at the location to figure out, you know, what's going to work for their system.